think as a matter of principle, once we have decided that we're going to operate as a retirement fund, then the principle that we've got to accept is that we are not in the business of running a business. And that's how we have been approaching our investment for the past many years. Operating as investment fund and running a business like Boustead. But moving forward is a retirement fund that should no longer be placed.
Not long after more than the 700 million ringgit privatisation of conglomerate Boustead Holdings Bhd was completed, the Armed Forces Fund Board LTAT unveiled its Sustainable 25 blueprint in mid-July. The strategic plan from 2023 to 2025 was designed to help LTAT face economic challenges and safeguard the social welfare of its 120,000 members. LTAT Chief Executive Datuk Ahmad Nazim Abdul Rahman shares with Business Times how Sustainable 25 is also being used to drive its transformation towards a sustainable savings fund. Here are the highlights.
We go back to the vision that we set out for LTAT under Strategic Plan 2025. The vision that we set out is for LTAT to be a sustainable provident fund. So there is one keyword there, which is sustainable. And what do you mean by sustainable is, in the context of LTAT, we define that as the ability to declare a minimum return of about 5% on an annual basis. But how do we achieve that is to have, most importantly, a diversification of portfolio. At the moment, it is quite imbalanced. We have got about 20%, 22% of our portfolio only in liquid assets, and the rest in assets that are not very liquid. And particularly our exposure to Boustead Holdings, which represent across the group, our exposure to Boustead Group is about 40% of our portfolio. So that represents quite a substantial portion of our investment portfolio. So we have got to rebalance that in order to achieve a more diversified portfolio that is constructed in accordance with our strategic asset allocation framework, which I mentioned earlier, which is a framework that has been embedded in the LTAT Act, which we amended recently. So how do we address that diversification issue, or rather the over-concentration of our exposure in Boustead when we face multiple challenges within Boustead Group? If you look at the market value before it was taken private against the asset value, there's a huge gap. The market value then was about 60 cents. It was trading at 60-70 cents, as against the net asset value of the company at about 1 ringgit 70 cents. So there's huge gap that is reflected in LTAT's balance sheet. So we have to address that, but we also have to take into account the multiple challenges within Boustead Group. You look at Pharmaniaga, is a company that is now PN 17. You look at BHIC, another listed entity, the company that has a very thin margin to fall into PN 17. You have a company like Boustead Properties that have not been generating income. The asset has not been performing. You have Plantation, which efficiency level is below market average. Our efficiency level, the Plantation asset is about 13%. That's against market average of about 23%. So we have got these multiple challenges across the group in each of the companies, and at the same time the huge debt that is due for repayment next year especially. If you look at the group debt, there's about 7 billion in debt across the group. At holding company, Boustead Holdings, there is about 3.4 billion debt at the company level. And about 1.65 billion is due for repayment next year. And at the same time, there is a perpetual sukuk, which in the balance sheet of the company is actually an equity, not a debt. But that perpetual sukuk carries a borrowing cost of about 11.6%. I mean, you don't have that kind of borrowing cost in the market as high as 11%. Yeah. I think as a matter of principle, once we have decided that we're going to operate as a retirement fund, then the principle that we've got to accept is that we are not in the business of running a business. And that's how we have been approaching our investment for the past many years. Operating as an investment fund and running a business like Boustead. But moving forward as a retirement fund, that should no longer be the case. As a retirement fund, I think we should be able to detach ourselves from any sentiment towards our investment assets. That's number one. As a result of this principle, then the way we approach the restructuring of Boustead is, number one, of course, to address the challenges that I mentioned earlier, and number two, to undertake this strategy as a value creation strategy, so that we would then be able to monetize or to divest some of the investments in a way that that is not in a way that is profitable to us, yeah, rather than as a loss-making exercise. Well, for each of the companies, we have got to take specific approaches on how we address the challenges. In the case of Famaniaga, for example, the company is in PN 17, and therefore it requires some amount of capital injection to repair the balance sheet and take the company out of PN 17. So if you want to maintain our majority stake in the company, of course we have got to inject the capital ourselves. But if you work on the principle that you're not going to run the business, you want to maintain as a minority stakeholder in the company, and keep that as a strategic position because of the position of Famaniaga in the healthcare system, then you have got to be able to work with another partner to help run the business. So that is one approach that we can take. Of course, this has not been formalized yet, but moving forward, that would be an example of the approach that we should take. Similarly with other companies, similarly with Plantation, with BHIC, with properties as well. So each company would have to be approached differently. So it will be either in the form of some monetization or in the form of dilution of our stake in the company. We intend to reduce our concentration by taking this route of taking it private first to facilitate the restructuring of the group. So we are not integrating, we are in fact diversifying away. But of course, the challenges is if you don't address the immediate problem of the company and the groups, challenges like the debt position, the PN17, the PN17 potential, the efficiency level of some of the assets, then of course we run the risk of having a domino effect across the group, because of the cross default provision. If you don't address the debt challenge or the debt problem, then it will trigger cross default provision that will then create a domino effect across the group until LTAT. And for LTAT, of course, there is an impairment risk. So that is the risk that we are facing as far as the Boustead restructuring is concerned. So that's why it's very important that whatever exercise that we do with respect to each of the companies should be able to address the immediate challenges of Boustead Holdings, because value creation will take time, but addressing the immediate challenge is something that we have to do in the short term. It's just part of the strategy to diversify, and for us to be able to be agile and to continue to operate as a retirement fund, then we need to have that diversification of our investment portfolio. So based on the strategic asset allocation framework, that diversification would entail about 15% exposure to public equity, 20% in fixed income, 10% in real estate, 10% in private equity. But also more importantly is within the public equity asset allocation, we need to have an exposure to international equity. Because if you look at the performance of the domestic market, domestic equity, year to date, KLCI performance has been negative 5.5%. Over the past 10 years, we are only looking at a return of about 1.2% annualized return of our domestic equity market, as compared to international equity market at about 8.6% annualized return. Given the performance of domestic equity, and for us to be able to be sustainable to deliver our return commitment to our contributors, we need to have that international equities exposure within our portfolio. S&P 500 performed last year 22.3%. MSCI is 19.3%. So there is a huge return that is being made from overseas market, but we are here investing only in domestic market. So we need to have that exposure. If you take, for example, the case of EPF, their exposure to equity market, or rather international market is just about 36%, but that exposure delivers a return of about 45%. So it is important that international exposure being part of our investment portfolio.